Namaste, everyone. Michele Granberg here. Welcome to another episode of Positive Energy, bringing enlightening television for your evolving soul. Do you live with a pet? The bond between humans and their animal companions is based in unconditional love and selfless caring. It is a relationship stemming from pure affection without judgment or expectations. No wonder it's so painful when these beloved family members pass away. My guest is Dr. Sandi Grossman, pet loss specialist. We're going to explore the nature of pet loss and simple ways pet parents can heal from grief. Take a deep breath and stay where you are, because positive energy starts right now. So, Sandi Grossman, welcome to Positive Energy.
Thank you.
It's so nice to have you here.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, so caring for a pet is a commitment for the life of that pet. If you love a pet, it's inevitable that you will eventually lose that pet.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about the unique nature of grieving a pet and how people can heal. And it's interesting, in the U.S., 85 million families own pets, about 67% of U.S. households. Wow. So this is a very relatable topic. So what are the fundamentals of grief? Let's start there.
You know, the first thing to realize is that no two people will ever grieve in the same way. You know, so even if you've lost the same pet, because different personalities, different grief histories. The second thing is there is no right or wrong way to grieve. As long as you're taking baby steps towards healing, that's okay. Everybody's always going to go on their own pace. Those are the two greatest things. And to realize, too, that while nobody goes through grief the same way, a lot of the emotions of guilt and anger and, you know, are similar.
I think that's really important for people to know, because people will start to judge themselves or criticize themselves or ask themselves, am I normal?
Yes.
And it's all within the realm of normal.
That's it. You know, I get asked so many times, like, am I crazy? It's like, no, you've lost somebody that you love.
You had a trauma, you had a tragedy, you had a loss.
Yes.
So talking more about this, describe the bond between humans and pets. What makes it special?
You know, and although we love other people in our lives, and we talk about the word unconditional love, I love you unconditionally, not a whole lot of people really get it. But animals really do. That's the beautiful thing. I always say you see the best of yourself in them. You know how there's like that mug that says, I want to be the person my pet thinks I am? That's it. You see the best of yourself, and that allows for vulnerability, right? So when you lose them, you know, it doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter what you look like. They just love you. And that's such an amazing feeling that most of us have never had before.
You're right, and we don't always have that with the people in our lives, because that's the nature of people. But in the eyes of our animals, we're everything. We're perfect.
We are perfect. Yeah. You know, they show us how good we really are.
I love that, and they mirror that.
Yes.
They also mirror the potential of who we can be.
Exactly. They teach us so many lessons.
Yeah.
You know, I always say, like, take a dog for a walk. And that dog, every time he goes out to see that tree, it's the same tree, but he finds something different about it. Like, what if we could do that? What if we could stay in the moment and see things that way? What a beautiful thing it would be, right?
So much to learn.
Yeah.
So with that, you know, why is pet loss so painful? So talk about that, you know, and guilt.
Yeah. So first of all, again, it is that loss of that unconditional love. You know, and we bring these babies into our world, right? And it's not like, I always talk about the difference between being a human parent and a pet parent. As a human parent, the child grows up, becomes more independent, doesn't need you as much. With a pet, they need you as much that first day as they do that last day. So we develop kind of like this Superman cape around us. It's invisible, but we think we have to make everything perfect, right? And when we can't, it's horrible guilt No matter, even if, doctors, veterinary oncologists always tell me, we can't cure cancer. Why do you think you do? Why do you think you could have done anything better? And it's all about learning that we do the best we can. And when you do the best you can with love, there's nothing else more important.
So sometimes pet parents will put all that on their shoulders
Yes.
unnecessarily and question themselves and doubt themselves, and the what ifs and the guilt.
Yeah.
And remorse is often just part of.
Yeah, so many times when a pet parent will come to me, I would say out of, say, 100 people who have had to euthanize a pet, 96 will question that decision at the end. Like, did I do it too soon? Should I have done it sooner? Should I have done it at home? Should I have done it at the vet's office? And again, the thing is to remember what we just talked about before, that all the pet wants is to be with you. And it doesn't really matter how and when, and actually I always say that when we bring these babies into our life, we also make a commitment, like a contract with them, that we're not going to let them suffer.
Right.
And it's painful, and it's horribly painful. Yeah. It's the most unselfish thing we'll ever have to do.
Yeah. So I hope that that's helpful for people who struggle with this, just to hear that it's common.
Yes, very common.
Yeah, so it gives people a little more, to give themselves a break.
And I will say something that many vets will say, which is better a day too soon than a moment too late. Right. And unfortunately, I went through that moment too late, so I know what it's like rushing to a vet in an emergency. You don't want that.
That's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why is pet loss minimized and largely disenfranchised in our society?
I always think our society isn't very good with grief anyway. But when it comes to a pet, unfortunately, not everybody gets that bond. I say that there's like 3 categories of pet owners, pet parents. Well, the first people have pets and they're working pets. So they're show dogs or breeders or farmers. Then you have people who love animals, but they're pets. They know they're pets. But then there's people like us, right, who take it that step further. And it's an amazing experience that we go through. I wouldn't give it up for anything. But at the end of that, I know there's going to come this horrible grief. But what happens is not a lot of people get that. And so we feel very alone. And sometimes we feel guilty even for grieving that much, saying, well, how many times have I heard I grieve more for my dog than for my grandmother or my mother? Because you have that special bond.
Yeah. It's an important reminder, that not everybody feels as strongly about animals in general, about pets in general, and certainly not about our own pets.
Exactly.
It's totally unique and personal.
It is.
And intimate, the relationship we have
and
with
I think
their family.
Yeah. And I think the most important thing is to not judge yourself. You're already grieving. Don't judge it. It's okay. You've lost. I always say this, like, why do we judge love or grief by how many legs we have? Right? Love is love. Grief is grief. It's 2 emotions.
So talk about anticipatory grief. What is anticipatory grief?
Yeah, so anticipatory grief is that unconscious feeling. A lot of times you don't even realize it when it first starts, but you may have that senior cat who used to jump up on the window and all of a sudden they can't jump up anymore. Or the dog who used to go for a walk and now just kind of wants to lay around. What it is you begin to realize that you have more time behind you than in front of you. And a lot of the emotions are the same as grief. You've got the dread, you've got the fear, you've got the sadness, you even have the guilt sometimes. Maybe if I had fed them better food, they'd be living longer. It's amazing what we do to ourselves.
So grief really can start even before the pet passes.
Absolutely.
The process starts maybe when you get the diagnosis, when it's
Yes.
terminal, or even if it's not going to be immediate, those feelings
Yeah.
subconsciously, of course, they come.
Yeah, you know, and I always tell people, though, it's so important to continually tell yourself, but he's here today, or she's here today. Because there's going to be enough time for grief when it happens. Why not enjoy every day you have with them?
That's a really important reminder. They're
Yeah.
still here, right?
Exactly.
They're still here. They're still with us. Let's enjoy.
Yes.
That's why they're so much fun. So what tips do you give to someone when they first lose a pet, when it's like just happened that day, that hour, that week, and they're so raw with emotion? What do you tell people?
Yeah, you know, and first of all, I tell people that their grief and their loss is valid. And again, not to judge it, but that they need to take care of themselves, because there are studies that prove that grief suppresses our immune system. So if you can't sleep, you may need to take something. If you can't eat, I always call it the grief diet. When Ma's died, I think I lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks. Just couldn't eat. So it's about eating small, healthy snacks throughout the day. Get rid of the idea of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You know, I also tell people, reach out for support. Don't try to go through this alone.
Self-care.
Yes.
Self-care and don't isolate.
Yes, exactly.
So important. So what is it to memorialize a pet that has passed? And what are some ways that people can memorialize their pet?
Yeah, and this is such a healing part
It is.
of the grieving process. And there's lots of different ways. I'll tell you, when I lost Maz, I actually had a memorial service. So I took like 3 days and I put together a memorial book with poems and pictures. I invited 6 friends. We all went to a park. And at that time, it was okay to release balloons. You know, they didn't, because this was back in like 2007. So we all wrote a note on a balloon and released, you know. But you don't have to, you can have a small family memorial. You know, if you live in a house, a great idea is to set up a memorial garden. You know, but if you don't live in a house, I mean, maybe think about donating to a favorite charity.
In their name.
Yes, in their
Love it,
name.
love
Like
it.
something, you know, maybe their breed, maybe their illness. So feline cancer.
Or the shelter, maybe, from
or
which
the
they
shelter.
came, or any shelter.
Yes, exactly. Or doing a scrapbook, doing writing is so healing too.
Writing them a letter.
Yeah, writing them a letter, writing their story and submitting it to a
writing
magazine.
an article.
Yeah.
Love that. Blogging.
Yes.
Making
all
a
of those
collage.
things. And that's what really helps you remember the love. It helps you begin to step outside the grief a little bit and remember the love that you shared with them. And that's why they're in our lives.
Yeah, keeps them alive.
Yes.
They're now in our hearts, so it keeps
Yeah.
that active engagement of our relationship with them.
Yes.
It continues beyond.
Definitely.
Yeah, I love that. There was another one you suggested, to plant a tree.
Yes,
Maybe
exactly.
with a little plaque or something.
If you've
I
got
love
a
that.
memorial, like a nice yard, you know, go get a couple of bushes or a tree, and you may want to put some of their cremains there. You could buy these really pretty memorial stones now. Put a stone out there, or a Tibetan prayer flag, and go and spend some time there.
Such a wonderful idea to
Yeah.
bring life, nature, life
Exactly.
in their name. I would think they
and
would want
so
that
many
that
of my
way.
clients will say that what they find is when they see the plant growing, it's like a part of their pet is still there and growing
Infused
too.
with- I love
Yeah.
that. So obviously you're very passionate about
Yes.
what you do, which is as a pet loss specialist. So say just a little bit about what led you. You mentioned Maz.
Yes.
I know that he was.
He was my 17-year-old chocolate point Siamese, and he got me through so much of life. And I was single, no kids. And then in a 4-year period, I lost first my dad and then my mom. And that was devastating for me, you know. And then when I actually lost him 4 years after that. And so I didn't know what to do. I mean, I could barely get out of bed for 2 weeks. I almost lost my job. It was that bad. And that was 2007. There wasn't, even in LA, there wasn't a lot of support out there. I was able to find a group. And I felt like Maz's paw kind of led me. Different things started happening. My job was going to end, and people were reaching out to me for support. So it was like, you know what? This is a way of keeping his memory alive.
I love that you feel that Maz had
yes.
had a role in that, nudging you as an angel.
And the crazy thing is that about a year after I started doing this work, I got a call from the hospital where he was at the end, and they wanted to bring in a specialist. So it had come like full circle. First I was the broken one, and then I was helping people who were broken.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love the signs, and I love, sort of the full circle of life in so many ways. So as a pet loss specialist, and again, we're introducing this to people, this is new, that this even exists, but what is your role? Like a little bit of what it would look like when you do individual.
Yeah, and so really the greatest thing I tell our students is that it's more important to listen. Your job, I always say, is like to be the safe vessel for them, that soft spot to land, where they know, while everybody on the outside doesn't get it, here's somebody who does. Here's somebody who's been through it. And even here's somebody who's healed from it. So if they healed, I know I can too. It's about validating the loss and letting them know they're not alone, letting them know they're not crazy, letting them know that by taking these baby steps, they're going to be okay.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that, relating to them, human to human, pet parent to pet parent, and saying, you know, you're not necessarily like the expert on everything, but you can be with them.
Yes,
you can listen and be with them one-on-one if they need that. And I would say it's a great thing, because what pet parent doesn't need a little bit of support just for them when they lose?
Or just to hear, like I said, you know what? I could barely get out of bed, and now here I am helping other people, so there's hope. Just to know that there's hope.
Yeah, I love that. So how do you guide people when they wonder and they question whether it's time to consider bringing a new pet into their life? How do you advise them?
I always have 4 questions that I have people ask. The first one is, why are you bringing in a new pet? And if the answer is, well, because I'm hurting and I want my grief to go away, do not get a new pet. Unfortunately, I have seen more than my share of when people rush out to get a new pet and either wind up giving it away or bringing it back because they just can't be with a new pet yet. So it's really about, if you say, why am I getting a new pet? And it's like, I have more love to give. I want to share what I have in my heart. That's when you're starting to be ready. But there's other things too. Can I financially afford? We all know pets are very expensive, especially as they get older. Can I financially afford it? Do I have the time? If I'm bringing in a puppy, that takes a lot of time to train them. If I'm bringing in a senior, they may need more of my time because they're seniors. You know, so these are the kind of questions. And then, am I spiritually or emotionally ready? Like, am I able to love? You know, asking yourself that.
It was great that you've boiled it down to some questions that make it so almost measurable that people can reflect on. And I would imagine after they answer those questions, they come up with their own conclusion.
Exactly. And I always say, because so many people will say, do you think I'm ready? And that's why I did this. It's like, well, answer these 4 questions, you know, and that's for you to figure out.
Right.
You know, so yeah.
So I know the pet loss specialist can often play a role with the vet.
Yes.
You know, before, during, and after the loss, you know, as a pet, as they're declining. So say just a little bit about your role with vets, what you do with them, what you say to them.
Sure. And so, and I will tell you, I used to joke when I first started doing this and I would go into a veterinary practice, I used to call myself like Dr. Death, because like I was coming in and kind of saying
to talk about this,
to talk about when you lose your, you know,
stuff.
and they didn't want to hear that, especially then. Now it is more accepted, and I think they appreciate it because they realize that end of life stage, if it's done right, they're going to keep that client. If it's a bad experience, that client will never be back. And so, I mean, I think about myself. I wish somebody was there to hold my hand when I was trying to decide, do I do an operation for Maz? Do I do chemo? There was nobody, and it takes the pressure off the vet, you know, because they are not trained. Vet school is very, very difficult, very, very expensive, and they're not trained on how to support clients. So we come in and we take that burden from them.
I love that. It's like a missing piece in that puzzle. It was just like there was an absence there without even a void, without realizing, between the vet and the client and their pet, where the pet loss specialist can fulfill that role, that intermediary go-between, but your primary concern is the emotional well-being of the person and the pet as well.
Yes, and this allows the vet to focus on his patient.
The physical needs.
Yes.
Right.
So we could also often be like an advocate, that go-between, like you said, between the vet and the client, and making, kind of coming to that common goal.
So you do educate vets as well with workshops and trainings and things like that. Are they relatively open, you've found, overall, and actually glad that you come in to provide them with some? Yes,
more and more. I mean, there's still work to be done to get the our message out. You know, I think I shared I did an end-of-life study. And in that study, 75% of the respondents said that the emotional care they received from the vet was just as important as the medical care that their pet received. I mean, that says a lot.
That says everything. That's what they walk away with. That's what they remember more than anything else.
Exactly.
That during their time of pain and grieving, that a word, a glance, a hug from a technician or from the vet.
You know, I often say sometimes to a vet, if you can look at somebody and just say, "I'm so sorry." Those 3 words sometimes can mean that much. Or, we're going to do, I can't guarantee things, but I'm going to do everything I can to help your pet. How much would that mean? Right?
Right. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I'm sure anyone can attest. They can remember when they went through grief what meant the most, and sometimes it was the tone of how someone said it as well, the intention behind it, even more so than the words, the genuineness.
And just even the actions. Like, one of the big things we talk about is, how do you have someone like check out or pay? You know, so we talk to vets a lot about doing it beforehand. Or just, you know, calling them a couple of days later. Most people are not going to run away from paying the bill, and they appreciate. I've heard too many stories about clients having to come out in tears into a lobby full of young dogs and pets to pay. It's horrible.
I've had that experience myself. It's very, very awkward, having just lost my dog and then going to pay for, you know, the services. It's just, you feel so vulnerable and so exposed.
Yes, and people are kind of looking at you too, and with that pity look, for her, you know, or and
so it's very, very, very important work.
Very.
It really is, and very rewarding. I'm sure you find it extremely challenging, you know, to hear the stories, but also it's such important work, and there's a lot more to it than I think what people even begin to imagine. So,
you know, I you know, so many people, like even my own family, like sometimes cousins and things will say, do you like doing that? I mean, you're dealing with death all the time. And sure, it's sad, especially when you're an animal lover, but when you see somebody who's just broken, you know, when you see their spirit broken, and they come into a group and they're able to smile, or they're able to reach out to somebody else who's new and coming in, it's just worth it. It's so worth it.
That's the point of it. That's the point of it, knowing that the process of grief does sort of move along and progress in its own time frame, you know, but there's hope that you can get to the other side of it and move towards healing. And and still honor and love your dear one.
And that's the thing, you know, and I always tell people, like, we try to get rid of that saying, like, to get over it or to move on.
Yeah.
You know, there's no, I mean, I'm still grief for my mom and dad and for Maz and Callie, but it's not the same kind of grief.
Yeah.
You know, and do I miss them? Sure I do, but I remember a lot of the love. So that it's like moving through, not getting over or moving on.
I love that distinction.
Yeah.
That's a great distinction. So we only have a couple of minutes left. So do you have any sort of final thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with?
Yeah, you know, I would just say it's okay to grieve, you know, and it's okay to go through this in your own way, and don't do it alone. Reach out for support. Today there's so much more support than ever before, online, in person, you know, and that's the best way you honor your pet, by healing, because they're not in our lives to leave us a feeling sad. They're in our lives to leave us with those lessons and the love that they share.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what they would say.
Exactly.
I believe that they're saying that right now,
Yep.
through you.
Yeah.
Through you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sandi. Really important work you're
good.
doing. Thank you for all that work. Thank you for teaching me this as well. I really do
Yes.
appreciate it. And thank you for being on Positive Energy.
Oh, I'm really glad I was able to.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Time to wrap up another inspiring show. If you're currently suffering from grief due to the loss of a pet or anticipating the loss of a pet, you are not alone. There are resources and support available. Feel free to reach out to me at michelegranberg.com. Thank you, Monday Morning Flowers Princeton, for the beautiful floral arrangement. Thank you for watching. Go vegan, vote blue, and join me next time on Positive Energy.